So, guys, I want to talk about AEW Forbidden Door, and I was just thinking to myself that I really want MJF to actually beat Hangman Adam Page for the AEW Championship. Now, why would I say that? That I think that it does a lot of good for MJF to actually win, and I want to go down the list of, maybe possibly 10 reasons why he should win. The biggest reason is it validates the contract, because last year when they had the contract, Christian Cage won it for AEW Championship, and then what happened was that at Revolution, they really just took it off of him by having him fuck up the main event and everything like that, really. So the thing about it is that when you have things like Money in the Bank or Feast or Fired in TNA Wrestling, you really have to kind of validate that. And usually the first time should validate it. And I understand that sometimes companies will subvert expectations by saying the first one's going to be a bad cash in. But you don't want to have a pattern of this match at All In. And then what happens is that, you have people who end up just not being successful with the cash in. So that's my first thing. Because then it's almost like, where do you go from there if people keep losing? Why would somebody want to be in that match when that happens, really? The next thing that I would say is that it prevents a long title reign. And this has been an issue in professional wrestling, is that they have super long title reigns. And that's a good thing, and that's also a very bad thing. It's a bad thing because if you do it all the time, it becomes predictable. Like, I think with my prediction, Hangman Adam Page is going to hold the AEW Championship all the way until All In at Wembley Stadium next year and lose it and give it out to Will Ospreay. So you kind of almost know that he's going to be champion for a little bit over a year. That's my prediction. But the problem is if you always do that, it's almost like, who's going to be, it's almost like a presidency. Like, who's going to be champion this year? Who's going to be a champion next year? Who's going to be a champion the year afterwards? So that's not good because, then it becomes very predictable. And I think that, quite honestly, it's good to surprise people. I think as a third reason is that there's more stories that you can do with MJF. And I'm going to break this off into two things. I'm going to break it off into Mark Briscoe, Mystico, and a few other people. That if you have MJF actually win, it's going to be, you can tell a story with Mystico. Like Mystico is upset, then he wrestles for the AEW Championship, or he cost MJF, at All Out or another event, so they can have a heavyweight championship match at AEW, at one of the CMLL shows or one of the All Out shows. Another thing too is, I'm sorry, we have ghetto ass neighbors blasting their their music. These guys, these Slim Shady type of guys. So, another thing about that is that, another thing about that is Mark Briscoe. And Mark Briscoe is very, very underrated. So there's stories that you can do with Mark Briscoe, trying to be like that Mick Foley type for AEW. And then you can also incorporate other people as well, really. You can try to say, hey, friends of Mark Briscoe, or people like Anthony Bowens and a few other people like that, because MJF knows how to antagonize a lot of people, really. And then the other thing, too, is that there's Bobby Lashley and MJF, which is a dream match, So I think that with MJF as a champion, you have multiple opponents. You have Elise Briscoe, who's trying to be the modern day Mick Foley, fight with Hart. Then you have Mystico, who could be a good Wrestle Dream opponent because that's an Antonio Inoki shit. That's more like a second Forbidden Door. And then you have Bobby Lashley. Then you have Hangman trying to get his revenge, really. So there's a lot of different stories that you can do with this. And I would also say that the other thing with that is you can have as well, it gets you out of Hangman versus John Moxley, because Hangman versus John Moxley has to die, really, because they're really trying to keep the Death Rider thing going. And I know why they're doing this, because it gives all these other wrestlers jobs, and it also does something where you're helping multiple people at one time, really. So you're like saying, well, John Moxley likes to be on television, so does Claudia and a few other people. So let's just keep the Death Rider thing going and going and going and going. Let's keep this epilogue going and going. So that way, Moxley feels like, what, he actually matters, really, when this thing should die, really. So, because, you could do something where Moxley wins at the end of the night, the lights out match, and then you're like, okay, well, since he won, let's do this one final time in a steel cage. We've already done the Texas Death match. You have a light out match, which is also a very violent match. You set that up with Swerve and Hangman last year, so this Moxley thing needs to die. The best way to do that is to find a new top antagonist, really. And I also just think that it just tells like a better story, really. So the other thing too is it tells a better story because Hangman and it tells a better story because MJF had Wembley Stadium, and with Wembley Stadium, what happened was that they sold out 78,000 people. The whole the whole movie that he did with Adam Sandler did very well at the box office and other things like that. So like it's all those good things, really. So it's almost like you can be like, what, look at me, what, I'm actually a ratings draw, what, I'm a celebrity, I'm doing all these really great things. What have you done, Hangman? You just moped around and other things like that, really. Like you are a guy, but you're not the guy type of thing, really, So there's a lot of stories that you can kind of tell with that, really. And that's really, really important. And also, too, he can be like, okay, well, now I'm the champion. I'm going to hold this until Wembley Stadium next year and beyond that point, really. So it tells a good story about MJF just wanting to be the champion forever, really, and saying, hey, you know what? I'm the one who can sell out Wembley Stadium. You're not that one, really. So there's like a bunch of stories within that. And I would say that for the UK crowd, seeing a title change would be a good idea, really, because I think that with a lot of professional wrestling shows, sometimes you want to change a title. Sometimes you want historic things to happen. What's more historic than the World Heavyweight title changing pictures, really? So I really think that could be something as well. And I think the final thing is the Hurt Syndicate, because the Hurt Syndicate, to me, right now is the best heel faction. MVP has great mic skills. Bobby Lashley is a formidable force. Shelton is a good veteran wrestler. You can have them as tag team wrestlers. You can have them as trios wrestlers. You can do the Freebird rule. You can do like MJF, Shelton, and Bobby Lashley holding the tag team titles. And then it's like Freebird. So you have to face two of them as well, really. Like, there's so many stories that you can do. Or you can even do MVP and MJF at one point. So, but because the thing is that there's so much longevity in the Hurt Syndicate. They know how to talk to the microphones. They know how to be a dominant faction. And MVP is a great manager because, like I said, they were going to have Speedball Mike Bailey possibly beat Bobby Lashley, or they're going to make Bobby Lashley look weak against other tag teams. So when you have a person like MVP, he'll say, hey, you know what? Giving it to MJF or swerving people, where people think that MJF is alone, but he actually hired the Hurt Syndicate or did other things like that. That's a good subversion of expectations. We want to set up good people, a good group of people to take us on, really. And then I think the next thing about that is that with the Hurt Syndicate, they're 4 people, and that's a good faction, because the problem is you kind of see like the Death Riders, who are like 5 or 6 people. You kind of see the Jericho Appreciation Society and other people. There's always like 8 or 9 people. Or if you make like Takeshita or Fletcher or other people a super faction, 8 or 9 people, we've already kind of seen that done too much. Like I think like a Fortunate 4 is actually really good, really, because it says that, okay, we're not big like other groups, really, because professional wrestling with the Bloodline, the NWO, in TNA Wrestling, the Main Event Mafia, the Death Riders, there's way too many fucking factions. There's way too many factions. So having a smaller faction be on top is actually good, really. So I really think that evidentially MJF as the champion could do a lot of good for AEW, really. I think the big thing is that people won't see it coming it will give Hangman motivation to get the title back, really. So they have like a one-off at All Out, and then we take it from there.